I'll admit why it's one of my favorite topics is that I've also experienced it where I thought I wanted more ownership for my team. And then at the same time, felt like it was pretty threatening as well, right?
Right.
The times where someone starts kind of running with an idea and selling it as if it's their own, where you're like, but didn't I come up with that? Didn't I? But then I've learned, but still working on it, to really appreciate that and see it as my biggest accomplishment, really.
This is Momentum with Sidekick, the podcast that explores what's shifting in business and leadership and what it means for you right now.
We're Bonny and Nora, both from Sidekick, where we help leaders turn complexity into clarity and ideas into action.
Let's dive in.
So, what I wanted to talk to you about today is admittedly one of my favorite topics. And I feel like something that most leaders, when you would ask them what they would want to see more of in their teams, is ownership.
Mm-hmm.
People taking ownership, being accountable for their results, really like showing up in the most effective, engaged way, passionate, taking initiative, all the things that are kind of coming with that sentiment of ownership.
Yep.
So we'd love to explore kind of what it is, what it takes to design for it in your team, and maybe even whether you should want it or not.
Yeah. The question or the comment of like, I just need my team to take more ownership, and what that's motivated by and the uncovering all of it. I totally agree. It is a common thing that's brought up. And, when I think of ownership and accountability, sometimes those words are used interchangeably, and I don't think they're synonyms for one another. So would love to unpack that a little bit today, where one, accountability is like more external, structured, managerial, where I feel like ownership is a bit more intrinsic, internal,
right,
unstructured, and voluntary to some extent. So, and maybe you can't have one without the other, but let's see.
Let's see where we get.
Yeah.
I'll admit why it's one of my favorite topics is that I've also experienced it where I thought I wanted more ownership for my team. And then at the same time, felt like it was pretty threatening as well, right?
Right.
The times where someone starts kind of running with an idea and selling it as if it's their own, where you're like, but didn't I come up with that? Didn't I? But then I've learned, but still working on it, to really appreciate that and see it as my biggest accomplishment, really. And that's kind of it's become a bit of a running joke that like once people start using your words or your ideas, that's kind of, you made it, right?
Yeah.
Like that's as a leader.
They've adopted it. They believe it.
Yeah, they own it. They've made it their own. And yeah, it has become one of those like telltales or signs that always make me feel really proud. But initially, always gets me to like kind of feels threatening, and then ultimately, those are my proudest moments.
Yeah, well, I laugh because I think of a moment you and I had together where we had been working with a client on their strategic plan, had gone through all the discovery, had led the in-person workshops with their board and all their partners, and got some big breakthroughs, got some good agreements, some good debates, some good discussions in the room that I was like, yes, like wasn't all, everybody agreed and nodded, and that was that. And so when we had, I think this was like our first meeting after with them, when we had sent them, here's the strategic plan.
Yeah.
Take a look, sent a pre-read, come to the meeting and we'll discuss any tweaks and things. And they showed up being like, we've rewritten it. We're like, what? Okay, tell me more. But it wasn't that they did rewrite it, but like the contents were all still there, but they just put it in their own words and used language that was more part of their culture or things they would say or would come up. And at the end of it, I was like, okay, the nuts and bolts of it are all the same, but this is amazing that the three folks took the time to like really, and it wasn't completely rewritten, but tweak it. And I was like, they've put it in their words. And, one of my new favorite phrases of there's ownership and authorship truly came to life And then a year later, we talked to them and it's on their, and they've really adopted it. And maybe that's the ownership piece that we're talking about. But I get it when you're like, so we've rewritten it all. And you're like, But yeah, it was a sense of pride because now a year and a half later, like it's fully living and breathing and not what your greatest fear of a strategic plan is. It goes on a shelf and you never look at it again.
Yeah. Yeah. And at Sidekick, it has even become one of our like differentiators, right? Like we claim that that's something that we always strive for is to create that sustainable ownership for our clients so that once we step away, they can still kind of create and drive the momentum forward. So yeah, seems to be quite a bit of energy around it. So in this episode, I would love to explore kind of how leaders can design or create the circumstances that would drive ownership. Maybe explore a little bit about what you said around ownership, responsibility, accountability. Are they the same? Are they different? Do they work together? Do they not? And to what extent does it rely on like a command and control, like a hierarchical force versus can it be created through like trust, clarity, autonomy, and so on.
Yeah. I think that's great. Where should we start?
Yeah, maybe first let's start with those 3 big words. Ownership, responsibility, accountability.
Right.
I agree with you. They are used interchangeably, but for me, they have a very distinct meaning. Yet they have some like complementary value or like align in one way or another. How do you look at it?
By no means are these probably like the definitions in Merriam-Webster's book, but maybe, starting with the definitions from the Sidekick book or the Nora book. So maybe starting with accountability. I see that as you are answerable to an outcome. So the work that has been done, you are ultimately answerable, have to answer to it.
Yep.
Whether it worked, didn't work, good, bad. But being accountable doesn't mean you're the one actually doing the work. Right. So that's where it's being responsible. You have been assigned tasks or activities to execute and see through the work to get to a desired outcome. So accountable is answerable to it, and is likely the person that's assigning it to a responsible person who has to see through the work.
Yep.
Now, ownership is kind of like, to me, the cherry on top. It's a mindset where you feel a deep sense of like pride, energy to not only get to the outcome, but take some proactive, different approaches to truly get the best outcome you possibly can and think differently and maybe go about it how you see. So it's like taking it that extra mile, that extra step, just not, I need to get it done because I've been told and this is what we need to do, but that extra energy, sense of pride that comes along with it, that intrinsic motivation. So maybe like putting it in an example, it's a very simple example, and having just hosted a party over the holidays, maybe we'll use that one, and that I was the host of the party. So I was ultimately accountable and had to answer to the outcome of a successful party. Everyone had a good time. Yep. No one got sick. People got home safe, reconnected, whatever my goals were, right? Had a good party and people felt good about it. Folks along the way were like, how can I help? Can I bring some? So some people were responsible for bringing an appetizer, a drink. So they didn't really care at the end of the day if the party was great. Right. I mean, for their own benefit, who wants to go to a crappy party? But they were responsible for bringing an item and were really focused, getting their item there and making sure it was good. And then ownership would be going that extra step. So the cherry on top of not only do I want people to leave having a good time, but I put thought into the menu and people's dietary considerations and who was coming and the ages of folks and is there kids' food there? And some people might leave early because kids got to, thinking through that. And some people haven't met before. So how am I creating Priya Parker's like a way to connect amongst people instead of sitting around, hi, who are you? What do you do for work? Right? Yeah. So that's ownership, like really wanting to create a memorable experience for everyone.
You were accountable to the success of the party, but you also had certain tasks tasks, I imagine, that you were responsible for. Some were
I was still responsible
delegated to others.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. And how about ownership? Were you...
I mean, I love a good party.
Were you the only owner, or were there other
Um,
people that showed ownership?
I think there were other people that showed ownership where they reached out and said, like, I know there's going to be a bunch of kids there. Would love to. I'll bring some games or some things for like an activity for the kids, who thought of things. And there was somebody who kind of reached out around that, like gave some ideas on like an activity to connect. And they said, I'm happy to lead it. So they kind of like became responsible for it. But yeah, there was other people. And I mean, this is like a third or fourth year going. So it's interesting how over time, everybody looks forward to it. I hope so. And like has a good time and wants everybody to have a good time.
Yeah. So I love how you said ownership is more of a mindset, more voluntary, more intrinsically motivated. There was one definition that I was able to find that I really loved, and I'm going to read it because it's hard to remember. But it is a definition by Pierce, Kostova, and Dirks from 2001, 21. And it says, psychological ownership is a cognitive affective state where people feel something is theirs. It taps into identity and intrinsic motivation. So really reiterating kind of your Nora definition. So it's a mindset. I think it's often associated with things like entrepreneurship, taking initiative, going the extra mile, type of things, right? But distinctly different from accountability.
I agree. They are not interchangeable, but they are mutually reinforcing.
Yes.
It may be so bold to say, and you tell me if you think this makes sense, that you can be accountable or responsible, but not feel ownership.
Yes.
But you can't feel ownership without being responsible and accountable. That's a little mind bending.
Yes.
I mean, I guess you could feel ownership and then it's like, why are you getting involved? But you're just passionate about it.
Maybe you can't feel ownership without fully being accountable. But maybe by feeling the ownership, you already kind of
are accountable or responsible for something. Yeah. So maybe there is that.
Yeah. But I think generally I would agree.
Yeah. So if a leader's trying to create more ownership, maybe start with accountability and responsibility. And do you have that right first?
Right.
Okay.
And I think it's also because accountability and responsibility can be designed for a little bit more or like created.
Yeah, it's more structured, managerial,
right?
Yeah, formal. Yeah. Do you, given my dinner party example, is there one that you've experienced or can think of to share that's more in like a work context of how these definitions would come to life?
Yeah, I would say if you just think of any like project where a project leader is assigned, a project leader would be held accountable by their manager to the results of that project. Then there are project tasks that are assigned either to that same project lead or to members of the project team. Those would be considered responsible for those project tasks. And then ownership would show up as the project lead going the extra mile to proactively improve some things, bring forward new ideas, change the whole thing, rally people around.
Right.
Put really like heart and soul into it.
Right. Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah. And the accountable person could also feel a sense of ownership in that they're proactively sharing, hey, here's this resource or this opportunity, or I heard this, or kind of helping looking outside of the project and equipping the project lead with some skills, resources that might be able to help them.
Yeah.
Cool.
So when we double click on accountability, and you already shared your definition that's like more structured, more formal in ways.
Yeah.
What are there any other things that come to mind with that?
Yeah, I think of like in my own practice and my own experience, especially I really felt like the need to embrace accountability or help foster that in my organization is when I moved to like a pretty senior leadership position
Mm-hmm.
and shifted from managing kind of entry level team members within the first few years of their career to managing leaders of teams. And I was like, whoa, this. And I went out from a like individual contributor, hands-on, in the weeds, helping execute, to like needing to develop and flex my leadership muscle. And I couldn't do it all myself, nor should I. Or I was starting to become a bottleneck or overly involved, or like heard the word micromanaging. Ugh, you know, like those things that really, so that, I mean, this comes from that type of experience, to frame that a little bit, that I think there are some pieces around. It really requires clarity of roles, responsibilities, what shared understanding of goals, our vision, our purpose, and the expectations as a group on how we're going to go about collectively achieving that. And it doesn't mean we're all doing everything, but what's everybody's piece of the puzzle. And it's up to managers to kind of create that two-way street, or that agreement to hold people accountable and be very transparent and communicate and all of those pieces. You know, and some tools that I love that I think really help this. We've talked about the entrepreneurial operating system before, their accountability chart. It's like a unique twist or a different version of an organizational chart that's like, what are the key functions? Who's in those seats and what are they accountable for?
Right. Yeah.
And it should be 3 or 4 bullet points, you know, and together it should be the whole. I really like that one. And then, you know, this is a bit of a delegation piece that once you get in there and it's like, okay, somebody needs help to be the responsible and you're the accountable person. This delegation acronym of, it's called QQTR, quantity, quality, time, resources, restrictions. I don't know why they dropped the R off of the end of a second R. Yeah, I don't know. But it's like that to me, I literally have it on a Post-it note on my wall in front of my desk to stop myself of like, don't be overly prescriptive. Give folks the freedom to do what they need to. They need to know the endpoint and have some guardrails. What's the quantity and quality you expect? What time do they have? What resources and restrictions do they need to keep in mind? So I find those are really helpful. And then, you know, from an accountability, I think RACI charts is something people hear a lot, or Apple has their DRI model of directly responsible for the initiative. Although I would argue it should be directly accountable, but that's fine. Where
DAI.
Yeah, we're in a RACI chart. It's to help map that out, and especially in responsible and accountable, the argument being there should only be one person there, because shared responsibilities, it can get really messy unless you're very swift and savvy at how you go about it. But that, to me, for accountability, you need clear rules, responsibilities, shared understanding on the goals, purpose, and how we are going to collectively go about it. And then as the manager, there needs to be a clear agreement, and you need to help support and hold folks accountable to that.
Yeah, so a key in what I'm hearing when you talk about accountability is that agreement. There's a relationship piece.
Like it's a two-way street.
Yeah, it's not an individual thing, whereas I think ownership could be, responsibility could be, but this accountability requires at least 2 people.
Yeah, and this is our commitment to each other.
Yeah.
You understand you're part of the commitment, mine, 2 sides of the same coin, and how are we going to do it together?
Yeah. There are some great case studies around there, how like accountability and ownership go together, right? Like how structured, formalized accountability can drive sustainable ownership. So I'm thinking of like the Apple's DRI model, where they introduced that and saw like a huge increase in like that engagement and perceived ownership piece. What is the other one? It's Google. Was it Google who implemented this 20% like passion time or something? Like people had 20% of their time to spend on their a project that they were really passionate about, and that kind of just jumped or skyrocketed the ownership and engagement as well. And then one that I'm a real fan of is an example from the Netherlands, but it has been like globally shared as well. Like they've I think presented at the World Economic Forum 10 years ago or something. Is it's called Buurtzorg. It's a in-home care organization. 15,000 people across the country, and they have decentralized all of the community teams. So like 10 to 15 nurses work together in their pod or their community. They have set clear accountabilities, and like they feel ownership over making sure that the patients or the elderly that they take care of get everything they need. And with that, they go the extra mile, right? Like they don't just follow a job description. They do whatever it takes to make their clients, patients, customers
that's so cool.
completely satisfied, right? So
it's kind of like a self-managing team, but one of the key factors, because everybody self-managed, self-autonomous teams, but you have to have accountability and ownership for it to really work well.
Yes. And I think what is a bit of a myth is that these self-managing teams or autonomous teams can just kind of rise from the ashes automatically.
Yeah.
Like it's very structured.
Yeah.
There is a very clear formalized structure, and that's required for it to then work and drive that ownership. So curious in our work with clients, is this a topic that comes up? What are we seeing?
Yes. I mean, you kind of said it at the outset that it's like, and it usually comes from a thinking partner speaking in confidence of, we need to have more ownership. And again, I think the words are used interchangeably when they shouldn't necessarily, but I find it comes down to a couple of scenarios when we probe a bit further. So maybe if this is sounding familiar to folks listening, it gives you some pause. But the first is where it's very obvious. It's like above the surface where a leader says, I'm too in the weeds. I can't do everything. I'm having a hard time balancing kind of my priorities of cascading communications to an executive leadership team, a board, or keeping my head outside of the rabbit hole and looking externally. Like I'm in doing the work. And they're like, and it's for a whole bunch of reasons, right? And sometimes they do it because they're passionate about it and I've been there where it's like, I just love doing this. I don't want to be involved and be along, and it's misconstrued. Or sometimes they just don't know how, are having a hard time delegating, letting go, or, people just don't know what their accountabilities and their responsibilities are. And then the other is it's less obvious, where there's pain points experienced in symptoms, working between teams. They're like, our process isn't working, it's broken, we're not achieving our goals. And when you dig a bit further, it's like, well, no one knows what they're accountable to for their goals, or this part of the system that keeps breaking is out of date. Like no one knows that they're responsible for doing the continuous improvements on that, right? Yeah. Because you always talk about it. So those are kind of two different scenarios. But usually I would say accountability for sure is the first place that I always kind of try and seek to understand of what that looks like. And then are they in a place where there's a sense of ownership? Yeah. And if there is or isn't, what do those circumstances look like?
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting how sometimes there is this awareness of like it being, there being a people problem, if you will. Yeah. And other times it is like people are looking at results, processes, more like the hard managerial stuff, but forget to think about like, is it really clear what people are accountable for? And resonates with me because I always get like itchy when people start saying like, when you go through a RACI chart or something and they're like, well, it's not really one person being accountable, but we all just work really well together. Well, yeah, that's great, but that
could still be true. You work well together.
Yes, like collaboration does not equal not being accountable, right? Like, and being accountable does not mean you have to do it all alone. So there's a lot of misconceptions I find around that, and also with a RACI chart that you mentioned before. The times that I've been with clients where they get like allergic reactions when I even say as much as a RACI chart. I think it can be a very, very valuable and helpful tool when used correctly, and really kind of make sure that there's only one person accountable to Apple's model with the DRI. And sometimes it just seeds more confusion, right? Which it is also totally fine. It doesn't work. It's not a one size fits all type of tool. But for me personally, it has always worked to kind of get a clear picture of like, how is it currently working and where might you experience some challenges because of it.
Yeah. And that's where with my definitions, and same thing, RACI charts, have had the same experiences, love it, hate it, somewhere in the middle of like responsible, who is doing the work? Yeah. Who every day is typing on their keyboard, picking up the phone, having the conversations, doing it, versus if something goes really well, or really poorly, who's
being rewarded,
who's getting the call,
Yeah.
right? And that's why I like this, like who's answerable to
Yes.
it, right?
Yes. And sometimes people don't want to be answerable to something because they think they then have to be responsible for the execution of everything too, which is, it's not always the case. Like the power is in then collectively working towards that result, right?
And being answerable isn't like you assign or you delegate something and then you sit back
and relax.
Relax, right? There's the removing barriers, proactively seeing something, help equip with resources, troubleshoot, those type of things. So there's like work to be done as an accountable person as well.
Yeah. So when a leader would, or if a leader would come to you and they are fully aware that they have some like issues in their team, ownership, they want to see more ownership in their team, and they are already starting to look in the mirror and say like, what can I as a leader do to create or design for more ownership in my team? How would you go about that?
Well, first, I big believer, like you can't move to ownership until there's clear accountability and responsibility. So that would be my first piece, right?
Yeah.
Who does what? Give me some examples. And think through like who plays what role in things. So what's their puzzle piece, so to speak. So I'd start there and work through everything we've just spent the last 10-ish minutes talking about. And if they're in a place that there's clear accountabilities, responsibilities, roles, shared understanding, now it's to move to that empowered ownership or this freedom that folks can feel, this autonomy, that sense of pride, that intrinsic that you can start to develop. And again, it's like different for everybody, but I do think there's like a bit of a playbook or some key things you can think about where you can codify or create some conditions. And maybe you don't need all of them, but there are definitely some conditions for creating a sense of ownership or a culture where you can feel that sense of ownership for folks.
Yeah. It's funny, as you were talking and saying like you cannot move to ownership before you kind of have established your accountabilities. Totally agree. And it also got me thinking around how people sometimes naturally tend to show more ownership, also tend to be the ones that get more accountability or kind of
I think another way I've heard it is
promoted,
or performance punishment, where you're like, I'm getting assigned all these things because you do it, right? Which is a whole maybe other conversation, but no, I totally agree.
To your point, they're mutually existing and they reinforce one another.
Yeah,
but you can also be accountable without feeling that ownership.
And do you agree that in creating conditions or, that culture where ownership can live and breathe and thrive, there are some key components that you should think about?
Yes. And to your point, I do think it starts with like the more formalized and the things that you can truly design for and control in a way. So I think what I heard you say as well is like it starts with clarity. Like people cannot feel ownership over something that they don't understand, right? So you need to be clear on, and this comes up in almost every one of our episodes, your vision, your goals, where are we going as an organization, and why are we even here? What are you a part of? Then I think that second step is that more formalized accountability structure. So who owns what, who's being held accountable for what, and ideally, this is a big belief that I have, it's one person being accountable for one thing. And then I think a third step in that is around that autonomy with guardrails. I think you said something like freedom within frameworks. So it is like, what is this sandbox that we are allowed to play in? And I think that can come through to life through setting values, alignment on that vision. Like, what are the boundaries that we're operating within? And then within that, people have the freedom to operate and to execute the way they want to. I continue to go back to like EOS methodology that we've implemented and embraced. Like the VTO is a very simple. The vision traction organizer, that is a very simple framework to align with a group around vision, values, what are creating that clarity. And then the accountability chart could be the next step to formalize those accountabilities.
Yeah.
What else is there?
Yeah. I also think like, and maybe this again feels like buzzwordy, but when you're talking about that, I'm thinking about it in like other outside of work situations I've been in, like in my rowing days, right? Of there also needs to be a sense of like trust.
Yes.
Like I know my part, you know your part, and we are going to do the best we possibly can. And you're going to pull as hard as you can and do whatever additional thing you need to do. And I'm going to pull as hard as I can and help set the rhythm and translate the rhythm from the stroke seat, right? Like, so there is that trust piece. So I would say not to overcomplicate it, but you know, if people are listening and going, okay, I've got clear accountabilities. Everybody knows that we all know where we're going and there's clarity on kind of our goals and that those are excellent, but you also need to trust one another that everybody's going to pull their weight. And I've definitely been in situations where it's like, oh, well, we know they're not going to do it, or I'm going to have to do their work anyway. Like, how do you get rid of all that stuff? Like you can get rid of it. And I think Lencioni's trust pyramid is a great piece for people to dig into. And I love the trust quotient, which is a formula that helps you assess like how trustworthy are you, how trustworthy is your team. And I've actually done it where I had everybody kind of do this formula themselves, and then we did it as a group. And hopefully I get it right here. So trustworthiness equals, and in the numerator, so the top part, it's your credibility. So do people believe what you say? And is it backed up? You're just not talking. Are you reliable? Do you say what you're going to do consistently? And do you help create a culture or an environment where people feel safe? So psychological safety. And divided by that, the denominator is your self-interest or orientation.
Oh, yeah.
So are you motivated by achieving your own ends, your own means, how you look versus the greater collective? And it's really interesting. It was surprising, right? It kind of takes trust, which feels like in the gray into like a black
like
and
a very
white
abstract
thing. Maybe as a leader, you just do it as yourself for yourself or, you know, like reflect on your team. But it is a good way to go like, okay, we've got all the right pieces, but will we actually, at the end of the day, we start the day and end the day truly trusting each other and knowing we have each other's back and we'll all pull our weight, so to speak. I love that.
Yeah, I agree. And trust is so important, especially like when you have clear accountabilities. And I think this is not everyone's favorite expression, but there's also like this stay in your lane kind of thing. Like you have to trust the other person to just do what they are accountable to. And it doesn't mean, again, that you cannot collaborate on things.
Yeah.
As long as you just have clear lines in the sand, ultimately, there's one person accountable, and that person should also be owning or be granted the autonomy, authority to operate within that, right? Like I think accountability without equal level of authority is also not going to fly.
Yeah.
And then authority, I think, in combination with that trust brings me to like the art of delegation, right? And there might be a whole other episode around how to effectively delegate, but I do think delegation is a key pathway to ownership. And how do you do that effectively?
Yeah, and give people the guardrails of everything and then the freedom to kind of fly and do what they need to do. And when it comes to delegation, I totally agree. There's probably a rabbit hole we could go down here. Something that always was a hard lesson I needed to learn, and I think about it quite often in the work that we do and the conversations we have, is just because something comes up, does it need to be done? Does it require time and energy, right? So I would say first in delegation, if you're the leader of the team, doesn't mean everything that comes across your tests needs to be done. And I like the matrix of urgency and importance, right?
Yes.
If it's really important and really urgent, it needs to be done. But think about who's the best person to do it, and maybe you, right? Or it may be someone else on the team. Although it's high visibility, high stakes, high risk, like you might not be the best person to kind of do it. But then if it's low urgency, low importance, maybe just park it now,
Yeah.
right?
You
Like
could delegate
time
it,
is
but then
valuable.
there's no significance to it either.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, the matrix goes in different ways. So I think that's the first thing of like, does something actually need to be worked on?
Yeah.
And if yes, what's the prioritization of it? Is it delegated? Do I do it? What does that look like? And then when figuring out who's the right person to do it, I like the skill will, or sometimes skill effort kind of grid there of thinking about who has the best experiences, resources, skills, capacity right now to take this on, and are they motivated? Are they interested? Is this something they've demonstrated they love doing it in the past? They've had some energy, or they've said like, next time this comes up, like who has that? So then that might help you determine like who the right person is to do it. And then my QQTR model, throw that in there once it comes to time to delegating. Yeah.
Another one that comes to mind is the GWC from from EOS. Like, does the person get it, want it, and have the capacity to do it? Right. Yeah. Yes, and with that delegation, you have your QQTR. I think there is also, again, importance in clarity, alignment on expectations. What are the outcomes, the results that you would like to see when you delegate something to someone? And in that, I think as a leader, it requires a certain mindset based in trust or rooted in trust, but also an openness to see things happen in a different way than you would have done them.
Yeah.
There's not necessarily one right way to do it, right? So you need to be open to that and humble to learn from other approaches as well. And sometimes also accept that mistakes are going to be made. Like things will fail. Yeah. And then create this psychological safety, going back to one of our previous episodes, where you create an environment that failure is okay and failure is the key to unlock learning, right? Like delegation comes with a lot of like learning ultimately as well. Yeah.
And that caught me thinking about the like in practice, I don't want folks to listen and go, okay, well, I'm just going to start doing these things and go for it. Like there is this like over communication that's required and ensuring people have the right skills or resources, capabilities, time to be able to do it well. But it's not like to do a good job of being responsible and having ownership. The accountable person delegates it and they go off and just do it, right? Like you talked about accountability or collaboration, but also things like as you're practicing this and trying it, like be like, how do you want me to be involved, right? As the accountable person. I found has worked for some people of like, we do the little milestone. So at the 10% mark, like, can I just come back and just make sure I'm on the right track? And then at the 50% mark, this is where I'm going. Get me to think differently, anything else I should be considering, or these are some challenges and how I've managed them, any feedback. And then let's talk again when it's done, right? So you could have those, it's not a set it, forget it, and then it comes back to you.
No, you create
boomerang.
this kind of rhythm or cadence for feedback and learning along the way.
Yeah.
Which I think is very powerful,
I definitely am all for the like, be pleasantly surprised, or if somebody does it differently, or like, holy, this is incredible. But I also know myself that I like care so much about some things that I'm like, I want to be just kept in the loop because I care and I'm interested and I'm like, want to ensure you do well. Like it's not micromanaging. It's not, at the end of the day, like it's your choice on some of this stuff. So, and I've had folks come to me looking when I've kind of been along the way or involved along the way, go, what should I do? And I go, what's your best advice? What's your best recommendation? And like, talk about one question that builds that like ownership to it.
Yeah. And I mean, in the end, as leaders, you might end up still being the person who's accountable for the task that you're delegating, right? So you should have a vested interest in it.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that you have to micromanage, but you,
cool.
Yeah. Great.
All
Bring us home.
Solves all of our challenges. So if you're like, oh, I want my team, this solves it all, right? But
just do these things.
Hopefully give some food for thought around accountability, ownership, responsibility are not interchangeable. So at the very least, like being aware of those words. And I think words matter, especially when trying to bring about some behavioral change or cultural change. And start with accountability, do kind of a little health check on that front. of clear roles, responsibilities, shared understanding on purpose, goals, and expectations on how we work together. And then start to look at how do you foster ownership and some of those pieces on clarity, trust, delegation, skills and resources that are available, and how can you bring what I truly think are like two halves of the same whole, two sides of the same coin for highly effective, highly performing teams. Like when these happen, like time and time again, it is like making music. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Great. Brings us to one of our favorite parts. The thing that we always like to do is to leave you as a listener with a bit of a challenge. So for this week, what I'm thinking is think of one. I would invite you to think about one thing that's currently on your plate, an accountability that you have. Then first kind of assess it through this importancy, urgency matrix. Does it even require attention currently? And then if it does, see with using like the skill and will matrix or the GWC, who could be a person that you delegate this to? And then try to effectively delegate it to this person. And afterwards, take a moment to reflect on it. Like, what did it require? What did the person need from you in order to accept this kind of delegated task? What surprised you? And what did you learn for next time? And I'm curious kind of just what shows up for you. And this shift, I think, will already start to build kind of your confidence, your capacity, your trust. And it will showcase to your team that you truly believe in ownership and trust your team.
Yeah. Walk the walk.
Walk the walk, talk the talk.
Right. So that's a wrap. Well, thank you for listening to Momentum with Sidekick. If you enjoyed today's conversation, like us, subscribe, let us know your thoughts on it, because we'd love to hear how you're building momentum in your world. And we'll see you next time.